So we're at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and get us started today. So let me just start off by saying welcome to Unleash the Leader Within. This is a program that I do for my corporate clients. I offer this in a full day workshop, and then I'll work with the client over a series of weeks to do small group coaching around this concept. And what I'm going to be doing over the next several weeks is over the next several months is I'm going to be taking one of the topics from this workshop series, and I'm going to be presenting it to you in this webinar format. So my idea is you're going to take a little bit of time over your lunch hour, and it's going to help you become more effective as a leader. See, my fundamental belief is that we were all called to lead. We're all called to lead. And all of us lead some bodies, but a few of you lead a lot of bodies. And my hope is that by learning these principles and learning these strategies and learning these techniques, you can become more effective at leading more and more people and doing bigger and bigger things. My mission is to help you become more so you can achieve more, so that you can ultimately give more. I believe leadership is a platform for us to make a positive impact on our society. So the more we grow, the more effective we become, the more we can help others. Now you might be thinking, well, Mark, that's great. So why now? What is the, why are we starting this today? And there's really 5 forces out there that I see that are impacting us as leaders. And first and foremost, and I talked about this in my communication leading up to the workshop, is the war for talent. You know, the other day in the paper, there was an article and it said for every 11 job openings, there's only 10 applicants. For the first time ever, there's more job openings than there are people that are unemployed. So what does that mean to us as leaders? Well, first of all, it means that it's slim pickings in terms of finding A players. And number 2, it means when we get an A player, when we've got somebody that we really like, that we really want to keep, that's really a leader that can help us achieve our mission, we've got to not only attract them, not only get them engaged, but we've got to hang on to them for the long haul. Number 2, there's demographic upheavals. We've got millennials, we've got baby boomers, we've got this multi-generational thing. And the generations are not just multi-generational, they have such radically different perspectives in a way that's probably never been dealt with before. And so what that means is that it's difficult for us to connect across generations, and it's putting pressure on us in terms of how we work together. And millennials, I believe, have the power to help us transform our organizations, but we need to learn how to lead them, because the one thing I've learned through my work is they want to be led, not managed. We've got digital technology, we've got mobile, we've got apps, we have Internet of Things, we have AI. And here's the thing, these tools can help us radically shift the way that our work gets done. However, they can also be big distractions. Again, increasing our need to be stronger leaders. There's a new social contract. You know, this idea of conscious capitalism, which I'm involved in the movement. I love the movement. If you're in Dallas, there's a great chapter here, Conscious Capitalism chapter. I encourage you to look into it. But Deloitte just released their research, and they said 89% of millennials want to work for an organization that stands for something more than just making money. Now, I would argue we've all wanted that all along. It's just become more pronounced. There's more pressure on us to address the social aspects. I can't tell you how many people I talk to, and when they talk about when they're interviewing, the questions that they're getting that have to do with their carbon footprint and how committed they are to the environment, it just shows you that the younger workforce is putting more emphasis on that than at any time in history. And then number 5 is just the pure pace of change. And the pace of change today is just horrendous. I mean, it seems like everybody's either disrupting or being disrupted. And I was reading the other day where the cost of starting a software company out in Silicon Valley in 1995, it'd take you around $100 million to launch that company. Today, you can do it for less than 100,000, and that price keeps falling. So what does that mean? So what that means is that your organization is probably competing not just with your traditional competitors, but you're dealing with the latest ma and pa or husband and wife startup somewhere out in Silicon Valley, or maybe all the way around the world. So here's what great leaders know. Great leaders know that they cannot control or they cannot predict where things are going. However, what they can control is the quality of the teams that they build. Teams that are made up of individuals who listen to the marketplace, who out-innovate the competition, and who add superior value regardless of where things are going. And that trait that we're talking about is the trait of leadership. And that's why the clients that I work with recognize that I just can't rely on me, and even me and my executive team. We've got to have people at all levels of the organization that know how to lead, that can help us make things happen. Now, as a leader, we've got to, as we grow, we probably get promoted. If you think back, I don't know the levels of everybody on the phone. I know some of you are first level leaders and some of you lead big teams of other leaders. But when you're first promoted, it's typically because you're good at doing a task. But as you grow to higher and higher levels of leadership, you need to learn to rely less on the technical aspects of your job and more on the leadership aspects of your job. And so as you grow, what you need to do is focus on a narrower and narrower set of activities that I like to call high leverage activities. And by the way, if you look in your notes, I've got a spot on this in your notebook if you want to kind of grab some of this as we're going through it. But these high leverage activities should fall at the intersection of kind of three key areas. One is the activities that you should do. The activities that you should do. And these are the activities that give you the biggest return. Or let me say it a different way. These are the activities that give your group that you're leading the biggest return. So seldom is it you doing work that somebody else on your team could be doing. It's you doing something different that levers them, that sets them up to do their work more effectively. But one is, what should you be doing? Number two is, what must you do? And this is work that's required because of the position that you're in. This is work that you really can't delegate, but you've got to do. And then the third is work that you want to do. And this is the work that fuels your passion. This is the work that gives you energy. Now, the challenge is that to be able to do that, you need to free time. Most every leader I work with feels consumed by the weight of their organization, especially as they grow higher and higher and higher. And what's happening is they're getting drawn into, or they're getting sucked down and dealing with issues that people on their team should be able to handle. So what we're talking about in Unleashing the Leader Within is, how do we drive down accountability, decision-making, problem-solving? I mean, how many of you, if we were in a live workshop, I'd love to go around and ask this question, but how many of you feel like recently you've asked your team member to do something or asked why something wasn't done, and they gave you some excuse that just moved the monkey from their back and put it square back on your back? Their problem became your problem. That's what we're talking about with accountability. They own the monkey. They get it done. They realize they're accountable. Now, to do that, they probably need to be better at making decisions. They need to be better at solving problems. And so we want to create an environment where they get better at making decisions, better at problem solving. As you grow as a leader, the quality of the problems that you deal with and the quality of the decisions you make should begin increasing significantly, because your team should be handling the majority of the decisions and the majority of the problems that you used to be involved in. And that's what we talk about. When we get that accountability, when we get that decision making, when we get that problem solving driven down into the organization, then that frees you to do the things that only you should do, only you must do, and only you want to do. And over time, a higher and higher percentage, or a greater and greater percentage of your effort should fall in the 3 big items that are in there under executive team. And that is, how do I nurture my culture? Said another way, how do I nurture my people? How do I create a team of A players that are the best of the best, right? That takes time, that takes intentional effort, not just to create the environment where you can recruit them, but where you can get them engaged and you can get them behind your mission, and where they stay with you and they work with you and they help you charge the hill for months upon months, quarters upon quarters, and years upon years. A greater and greater percentage of your time should go to strategic thinking. You know, what's our strategy for getting this work done? And is it right? Should it be tweaked? Are there better ways to get this work done? You know, I mentioned AI, artificial intelligence, earlier. Artificial intelligence is dramatically changing the way that work gets done. And it's creating 10x breakthroughs for my clients that are finding ways to bring AI into their organizations. How much time are you spending kind of looking at those new technologies and brainstorming how you can lever them? And then the last is planning. And we've all been raised that if you fail to plan, you're really just planning to fail. But how much time do we really take to work on our organization versus in our organization? So my mission is to really help you rise up, if you will, and become that leader that's over the top of the trees, that's not caught up in the complexity of the day-to-day execution, so that you can spend more time doing those high leverage activities, whatever those are for you in your unique situation, in your unique environment. So leaders see things as they are. I want to give you kind of a metaphor to think about leadership, and you can take this back and share this with your team. And if you buy into this like I do, I really think this will help you, and really help you as you work with your team members. But leadership is a mindset. So leaders, they're able to see things as they are. Jim Collins called it, they're able to face the brutal facts of reality. Now, they don't see things better than they are, right? In other words, don't face the brutal facts of reality. We call those Pollyannas. But on the other hand, they also don't see things worse than they are. You know what we call those people, right? Drama kings, right? Drama kings, where the sky is falling all the time. No, they're able to see things where they are. And if you went to a department store this afternoon and you were looking for a particular store and you went to the map, it would show you where that, and you found that store, that map would not do you any good unless you knew where you were. In every department store, they have a big sign that says, "You are here." And that's what a leader can do. A leader can sense, here's where I am, right? And they can face those brutal facts and be honest with themselves. But they can also see where we want to go, right? So in the department store, okay, I see the store I need to get to. That's where I need to get to. A leader can see how things can be better. We call that vision, right? So they have vision for how things can be better. But then they have the third trait, and this is what makes leaders, this is what fills the packet, makes a well-rounded leader. Not only can they see where they are, not only can they see where we need to go, but they have two traits that allow them to make that future vision today's reality. One trait is discipline. For things to change, I must change. For things to get better, I must get better. And so a component of leadership always comes back to my ability to grow. The second thing they have is called influence. It's called influence. It's the ability to get others on board with what I see and want to follow me. The number one, for me, is too small of a number to create greatness. If we want to do anything special, we've got to get people on board to help us make our vision of tomorrow, today's reality. And that influence is not just the people on our team, but it's the people that are beside us. And guess what? It's the people that are above us in the organization. It may also be clients. And so we're going to talk about that. Before we do, I forgot I had this slide in here. This is one of my favorite quotes about leadership, and it's from Steve Jobs. I'm a big Steve Jobs fan, but he said, management is about persuading people to do things they do not want to do, while leadership is about inspiring people to do things they never thought possible. And I just absolutely love that vision of leadership. So today, unleash the leader within. So the focus, as I said in my email, is going to be around how do you be the type of person that can attract and retain A players? And so we're going to really focus on two things. We're going to focus on this idea of influence. And we're going to talk about how do we better understand our employees' needs, and then how do we meet those needs? And I'm talking about the needs that really lead to long-term loyalty to you and loyalty to the mission. And then how do we create a team environment? How do we use the visioning process to really create a team environment that brings out the best in our people? And I'm going to give you before we move on, I'm going to give you just a quick commercial on Rise Performance Group. But we were founded in 2011. We're based down here in North Texas. And our goal is really to be the preeminent leadership development organization. We're striving for that. And I think in a lot of ways, we're delivering on that. And in a lot of ways, we've got work to do. But we're working really, really hard in this area. And the certifications that I've equipped myself with that I think make me uniquely qualified to deliver on that claim is, one, my partnership with John Maxwell. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more as we go through today. The other one is my certification with Scaling Up. It's the premier business planning system. I'm also a member of NSA. It's the preeminent speaking association. Next year, I will be named a certified speaking professional. Puts me in the top 5% of all people that are associated with that organization. I also do work with Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team through my partnership with Wiley. I've got hiring assessments, Leadership 360. So we're really bringing a great, well-rounded mix to an organization. And this gives you an idea of just some of the clients that we're working with today and that we've worked with in the past. And this curriculum that I'm taking you through now is really inspired by John. I really got inspired when I read John's latest leadership book, and it's called Developing the Leader Within You 2.0. And this was John and I a couple years ago at a conference. But I really encourage you to pick up this book. And if you haven't read it, I really encourage you to start making your way through it and start sharing it with your team. And this gives you an idea of some of the topics. And again, in future workshops, so in our workshop next month, we'll be talking about creating positive change and problem solving. So I'll be breaking these different topics down as we go through this program over the long haul. So let's get into this idea of influence and what leadership is really all about. John says, and he's really drilled this in my head, the true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing else. And a lot of people are like where I was several years ago, meaning when we see somebody with a leadership title, or when we see somebody in a position of authority, or we see somebody in a power spot, we think they're a leader. And you know what? Sometimes they are. But here's what I've learned. Oftentimes they're not. And they're not because leadership is not about position. It's not about title. It's not about power. It's not about authority. Leadership is not something that can be assigned. It's not something that can be appointed. It's not something that can be awarded. Leadership comes from influence. And influence cannot be given. Leadership must be earned. So if you've got a great title, if you've got a bunch of people reporting to you because they have to, congratulations. But I just encourage you to look at that as the beginning spot of your leadership journey. And I know a lot of you on the call have invested heavily in your leadership and you're very effective. But if you've talked to me, and I know we have, there's always room to get better. And we can make a bigger impact as we grow as a leader, as we learn to leverage less our title, our position, the power that we're given, and we learn to leverage more the influence that comes from our character and the influence that comes from the respect we garner from those we lead. And at the bottom of this slide, and I've got it in your notes, there's 2 fundamental qualities that'll help you gauge, am I becoming more effective as a leader? Regardless of whether you're being promoted, regardless of the new positions that you're getting, am I becoming more effective? And the 2 are, number 1 is the quality of the individuals that are following me increasing. So if I'm a 5 as a leader, you know, I may be able to recruit a 6, I may be able to even recruit a 7, but they'll probably get bored following me and they'll probably leave. They'll become disgruntled and they'll probably leave. I can probably attract 5, certainly 4s and 3s, they'll want to follow me because I'm a stronger leader. So I'm a stronger leader than they are. But if I want to attract 7s, 8s, and 9s, then I got to aspire and work like crazy to become a 9 so that I can acquire, so that I can attract that kind of talent, and so that I can get that kind of talent engaged and behind and aligned with my mission, and so that they want to stay and work with me for the long haul. Now, this also applies to your peers. You know, you start thinking, what peers do I have good relationships and do I feel like I have good influence with, right? They're willing to buy into me and what I'm doing with my department. And what about the bosses that I work with, right? Those that are above me. How many of them buy into me and see me as a thought leader and see me as somebody that they want to come to and get advice from and understand how I'm looking at the marketplace? These are indicators as to how well you're growing as a leader. I'll tell you one other place for those of you that run sales or you're working with external clients is what's the quality of the clients that are willing to follow me, right? And am I seeing that increase? When I go into an organization, do I get taken up? Are they like, wow, you know what, you really ought to be talking to my boss, or you ought to be talking to this senior leader? Or do they say, you know what, you really need to go down and work more over here in this department? These are indicators in terms of your level of influence with these different types of groups that you work with. The second is, are those that are following you willing to change with little or no resistance? So when you roll out a change effort and you say, hey folks, you know, my vision's evolving. I'm seeing we need to move here. I'm seeing we need to put this new practice in place. I'm seeing we need to implement this new system. I'm seeing we need to put this new check and balance in place. Does your team say, okay, we're on board, boss. Where do we go? How do we support you? How do we make it happen? Or do you get resistance? And if you get resistance, it's just telling you there's an opportunity for you to grow as a leader. Don't be frustrated. Be excited that you're facing the brutal facts. Here's where I am, and here's where I want to be. There's a delta. I need to start taking some intentional steps towards getting there. And that's what I'm hoping you're going to get in these little nuggets through this workshop series. I love this Chinese proverb and the accompanying picture that if you think you're leading and nobody's following, maybe you're just taking a walk. Although I think Margaret Thatcher was even a little bit more direct on this topic when she said, being in power or being a leader is a lot like being a lady. If you have to tell somebody you are, then maybe you're not. Ouch, huh? Margaret Thatcher just nets it out. So I'm going to give you a model here. And I continue to evolve on this model. And I think you're going to really like it. Many of you have heard of this, and those of you that have been in my workshops, you've seen it. I'm adding some new stuff today that I think it's going to really help you take this back to your teams and continue to work on this concept. But it's built around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And Maslow was one of the early adopters or early pioneers of the humanistic approach to management. And he wrote a paper, I think the year was 1943. Don't fact check me on that, but I'm directionally right. I think it was 43. And in that paper, he laid out kind of 5 levels of needs that all people have. And his model, and I bet most of you on the phone have heard of his model. His model has become so widely adopted, so widely accepted, so widely taught that today it's just assumed this is the de facto truth. And so I love using this model to understand how the people on our teams are thinking. So let me run through it real quick. It starts at the bottom. This is the physiological needs. And these are the basic functions of survival. So think food, water, heat and shelter. The next level is safety and security. So think financial, think health, think well-being, health and well-being, and think financial as well as physical safety and security. The third is relationship. This is the need to be accepted. It's the need to love and be loved. You know, they say as adults, one of the most stressful days or one of the most stressful experiences that we deal with is starting a new job. And it's because of the stress involved with, am I going to be accepted in this new environment? I mean, am I going to fit? Am I going to be a fit in there? And so this is a very real need, and we're very tribal by nature. But remember, Maslow said these are hierarchical, meaning that once it's hard to meet a second level if the first level need is not being met. So for example, if we're really sick, or if we're dealing with a disease or our house, like think what's going on in the Carolinas with these floods and they've lost their homes, then people don't really care whether or not they're being accepted. They're more worried about getting that piece of their life back in order. The next level, sorry, I'm going backwards instead of forwards, is esteem. And so it's interesting. Once we get accepted, then we want to differentiate and be different. And then the top level is altruistic. Now, in the early days, Maslow called this self-realization, meaning I want to be the absolute best version of myself that I can be. He went on to rename this the altruistic, which is about being a part of something bigger than ourselves. Now, the first 4 of these are what are called deficiency needs, meaning we get drawn down to the lowest common denominator, and that tends to grab our attention until that need is resolved, and then we go up. The only difference to that, the only one that doesn't fit that is that top level need, and that's the altruistic need. And we all have an innate desire to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And this is what we're seeing with the millennials in the Deloitte research that I mentioned, where 89% want to be a part of something bigger than just making money. They want to meet that altruistic need. But let me ask you a question. What do you think determines where a person is on this hierarchy? What do you think determines whether somebody thinks they're dealing with the safety and security, or are they at relationship, or are they at esteem, or are they focused on altruistic? Well, I'll tell you, what determines where they are is their mindset. It's all in their head. Because if you've traveled internationally, then you see people living internationally that live in what they call homes that we would call structures, maybe, right? I mean, just a piece of plastic over the top, or tin, and no bolted doors, no locks, but yet they spend all their time giving back and helping in the community and being a part of others. We see people in really developed countries like the United States, where people have wealth beyond imagined to some parts of the world, yet feel like they're fighting for survival when they're really quite blessed. So if we're anywhere we kind of want to be on here based on our own mindset, what do you think has the biggest influence on our mindset? And the answer to that question is the people that are around us, our peer group, namely those that we look up to. Said another way, the leaders in our lives, the ones that are most influential. So what I'm telling you is that you have an impact over where the people that are around you, where they see themselves on this hierarchy. You are a person of influence. You influence where they see themselves on this hierarchy. So one final question. So where do you think somebody is the happiest? Or where do you think they're the most loyal? Or where do you think they're the most engaged in their work? Well, you're right. It's when they're the closest to the top as possible. When they're at the bottom is when they're the most disengaged. So we want our folks to be up living in that esteem and that altruistic level as much as possible as a result of our leadership. And I really had this point crystallized for me a couple years ago. And I showed up for church and I was early and I got to talking to a guy next to me while I was waiting for my family. And he told me that he worked for Oracle and he was a road warrior, and I've been a road warrior, so we were kind of really bonding. And then he told me that early in his career, he worked for Apple. And he said that he worked up off Beltline here in North Texas, and they made the original Apple IIs up there. I didn't realize that. And he said, and I said, so how was it? I said, I've heard these stories where everybody's just fanatically engaged and people are working like crazy. And he said, Mark, he goes, you know what? He goes, that's true. He goes, I would gladly change where I'm at today to go back to the feelings I had working for Apple back early in the day. And I could just see his sincerity. And I said, so what was it about it? I mean, what was it that was created that kind of atmosphere, that kind of pull, that kind of engagement? And he said, Mark, you know, he goes, back when I worked there, he goes, we never once looked at our jobs as we're just making computers. He said, we thought we were working to make some kind of product that was changing the world. And if you think about where change the world fits on this hierarchy, it's at the very top, isn't it? It's right up there under the altruistic needs. And Steve Jobs was a unicorn in his ability to tie people's work to that altruistic need. And so what I've done in your notes, if you look in your notes, I've given you kind of 3 levels to think about these needs. And one is taking the first 2 levels and thinking about this in terms of the functional needs. So have I created trust with my people? Do my people feel like they're treated fairly? Have I given them the tools to do their job? Have they been trained appropriately? Do they feel like their compensation is fair? Okay, some people think we have to pay more than market. And if you can, that's great. But you don't have to have an engaged sales team. It just can't be a distraction. People can't feel like they're being taken advantage of. And the last one is, do I feel like I have a secure future? And if you want to see people move down to tier 1 functional needs, start to mess with their future and watch how the behaviors, it's not positive. Don't do this unless you have to. But those of you with some gray hairs like me, you've been through some environments and you see people start fighting for their survival, fighting for life, and you see how the behaviors change, right? When they feel like my future here is not secure. Now, if we have that met, then we can move up to tier 2, right? Now we can start to meet these emotional needs, recognition, the feeling of winning, growth, care. I feel like the organization, I feel like my boss, I feel like the leader above me cares about me. I feel like I'm respected. My opinions count. What I have to say matters. I'm accepted, right? I'm a part of the organization as a whole. And when those are met, then they'll truly buy into our purpose, our cause. They'll see the true meaning in the work beyond just doing a job. See, if these things are in the way down here towards the bottom, then it's hard for them to connect with our cause. It's hard for them to connect with our meaning. But if we can remove these things, then we have a higher probability of getting them to connect at that higher level. So you may be asking, okay, Mark, this all sounds great. How do I do it? How do I move up? How do I tell where I am today? You may intuitively know, but is there a better way that I can tell where I am today, right? Face the brutal facts. Where am I? I know where I want to go. I know I want an engaged workforce that's living up there in tier 3, but how do I start to chart that course? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I anticipated it. And so I put some things in your notes that I believe are going to help you. And you know what I missed here? I'm getting ahead of myself. See, I don't have my notes because of my screen. So bear with me. Let me summarize 3 things to focus on out of what I just talked about. So star these, underline them in your notes, whatever you need to do. But there's 3 main things that are going to ensure our team is most engaged. And that's when, number 1, they're growing, they're learning new skills. Number 2, they're doing work that has purpose, work that has meaning. And number 3, they feel like they're winning. And if you go back to my chart, those are the ones that are right there at the top. And so ask yourself, you know, am I developing my people? Am I sending them to training so that they can learn new skills? Are you teaching them leadership so that they can be more effective? When you think about purposeful work, are you linking their work to the company's mission and to a greater cause or a greater purpose than just helping the company succeed? See, purpose gives significance to what might otherwise be viewed as meaningless details of the job. And number 3, are they winning? Are you focusing on what is working or what is not working? You know, have you found an area in your work or in your department where you can claim victory? This is powerful. We all love to be a part of a winning team. I'm from Kansas City. We've got some Kansas City folks on the call. And Kansas City is a town of about 460,000 people. When the Royals won the World Series a couple years ago, 800,000 people showed up to celebrate that parade. Why is it? Because we all want to be a part of a winning team. And my daughter went to I want to share a story real quick. My daughter went to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is a beautiful university. And I met the guy that runs landscape down there. He's actually over, his title is Director of Landscaping or whatever his title was. But he's a great leader. And he's created a program at Ole Miss called Landscape University. And his tagline is, we're turning leaders into leaders. And I was just so inspired. I said, so Jeff, I mean, so tell me about this. And he said, Mark, I'm connecting my team who's out mowing the yard, who's raking up the pine straw, who's trimming the bushes, to associate the quality of the grounds that we create is directly attributable to the quality of the students that we attract. And in our medical school, if we attract the best of the best, that gives us a chance. It gives us a slim probability of recruiting that student that we empower to one day cure cancer. And I thought, oh my God. And I'm not doing his story justice, but I will tell you this. The other day, I stumbled across an article, and I thought he made this point really good that we're talking about here. And in the article, he's being interviewed, and I'm going to read it to you. That the author said, why is it important that the landscape department on the campus of the University of Mississippi be staffed with leaders? And he said this. He said, encouraging and empowering everyone to be a leader gives them ownership of their attitude, ownership of their actions, and ownership of their results. Remember, we kicked this call off talking about driving down accountability. Ownership is really, really, really close to accountability. So he said ownership of all those and ownership of their results. He said leading by example while encouraging others to lead. He said this creates a culture of excellence. Pretty good, huh? So it really speaks to that whole idea of why it's important to grow and invest in our people. Then he said, the interviewer said, what was a turning point for getting your team behind your vision of being the best of the best? And here's what he said. He said, I knew we were getting traction when I heard the staff talking about being the best of the best as it relates to the quality of their mowing technique. Did you hear that? The quality of their mowing technique. We learned as kids playing sports that people take pride in being number one. I just talked about it. He said, I try to tap into that natural drive to be winners, to be successful at what we do, and simply strive to be the best. So write this in your notes. How do we attract A players? Number one, we tie the work to a greater purpose, we invest in their growth, and we help them win. We create that atmosphere of winning. Well, Mark, but you don't understand. Our business is tough and we're not winning right now. It's our job as leaders to point to the successes, point to the victories that we've had. We've always heard that success breeds success. I've never heard that failure and incompetence breed success. We've got to find, now it's our job to bring A players, right? If we have people that shouldn't be on our team, that's our job to deal with it. But success breeds success. That winning attitude will carry you a lot farther than beating people up and having them focus on the things they're not doing. What's wrong is always available. There's a ton of it available on your team and the other teams on this call. But what's right is also available. And if we can get them focused on what's right, we create a better, higher probability that we create momentum and really go do something special. Number two, and this is just as important, so store this in your notes and take this back with you and work on it. But number two is ensure that your team members are not distracted by unmet lower level needs. And I'm giving you some tools in your handout that are going to help you with this. And many of you have heard of a company called Gallup Corporation. They do a ton of primary research. They're one of the best of the best. And for the last, I don't know what it's been, maybe 20 or 30 years, they've been doing research on what really causes employees to be engaged. And in 1996, they coined something they call their Q12. And their primary research has proven that these questions, if answered in the affirmative, lead to high engagement. Said another way, team members that are on your team, they're engaged with you, they're helping you charge the hill. What I've done for you is I've taken the 12 questions and I've laid them out by the different tiers. And so what I encourage you to do is go through the 12 and say, how well am I doing as a leader in creating the environment where this question can be answered in the affirmative? So grade yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How well do I think I'm doing? And then go meet with your team members and ask them. Ask them the questions that are on here and make sure that you get all those level 1 questions answered. Then move on to level 2. And once you've got level 1 and level 2, then you're going to have the highest probability of level 3 really sticking. If tier 1 and tier 2 are still issues, then it's going to be hard to get them to focus on tier 3. It's the Maslow hierarchy, right? They need those lower level needs met before they're going to worry about those needs that are above them. And I've highlighted a few of them here on the screen. You can check these in your notes, but tier 1, I know what is expected of me at work. This falls right on us as leaders. That's our job to create that clarity. In tier 2, in the last 7 days, I've received recognition or praise. If we're not recognizing our people, then either 1, we've got the wrong people, or number 2, we're not taking advantage of an opportunity to really inspire our team. And I love this. At work, my opinions seem to count. Are we creating an environment that allows people to express their opinions? The challenges to be solved in our organizations exist in our teams. I've met a lot of your team members. You've got wicked smart people. Our job is to create an environment where we can get those opinions out and harness them so that we can go achieve something bigger than we could do on our own. Remember, 1 is too small a number to achieve greatness. And then, on tier 3, the mission or purpose of my organization makes me feel that my job is important. Said another way, I'm linking what I do to a greater mission, a greater cause out of the organization. So, man, we've covered some great stuff already, and I want to save some time for questions. But I want to open up. I want to cover one more topic with you, and that's this topic of vision casting. And here's the thing. I'm going to take a drink real quick before I have a hacking attack on you. It's allergy season in Dallas, which means I'm dying. But we're getting better, and hopefully we're on the downside of the allergy season. But here's the thing with vision casting. Leaders are skilled at creating a compelling vision. This is what we do, right? And they're skilled at making it relevant to everyone. A compelling vision should tap emotion, right? It should tap emotion. It should connect with the hopes, and it should connect with the dreams of all stakeholders that are associated with your leadership. Napoleon, the great Napoleon Bonaparte, said, "A leader is a dealer in hope." Coos and Posner said, they were the authors of the Leadership Challenge, but they said, true leaders are about something bigger than all of us. Leaders are about making a difference in the world. Go back to my Steve Jobs topic that I talked about a minute ago. Here's the thing. Write this in your notes. Powerful visions move people to action. Weak visions have absolutely no power. They're impotent. They have no power. But does it take courage to cast a powerful vision? Does it take confidence to cast a compelling vision? You bet it does. And that's why so few leaders are good at casting a compelling vision. It's a shame. But I believe that this is a muscle that we can develop. And if the leader lacks confidence, then what are the chances that the followers are going to emotionally connect and commit to that believer? I mean, the reason that Jobs could cast that vision that we're going to change the world, making silly computers, and everybody bought into it is because he could cast that vision with so much congruence and so much belief. And it's that emotion that comes through our belief that creates motion. You can write this in your notes. It takes emotion to create motion. And this is where you start to see real differentiation between managers and leaders. I think of managers as more maintainers, right? A manager can maybe maintain momentum, but man, a manager is not going to create a momentum. And managers tend to rely on systems. They tend to rely on controls, where leaders, on the other hand, are innovators and creators. They rely on people. And creative ideas become reality when people who are in a position to act catch the vision of their innovative leader. And again, leading by example is how leaders make our visions and how we make our values tangible. It's how we provide evidence that we're personally committed, and that evidence is what people look for and admire in the leaders, people whose direction they're going to willingly follow. And Leroy Imes, this is one of my favorite leadership quotes, but a leader is one who sees more. Right? We talked about vision. We talked about seeing as they are, but seeing things better. So a leader sees more, they see farther, and they see before others see. And I think you saw this, those of you that have been around. I mean, gosh, this story is actually getting a little old on me, but when the iPod was created, you know, this is an example of this principle being played out. You know, Steve Jobs had a vision. And by the way, who should have invented the iPod in the first place? Who botched that thing? Well, there's a number of companies, but I point to Sony. I mean, they owned the record labels, and they had a Walkman. I mean, they were in a perfect place to develop the iPod. But Jobs saw it, right? He saw it. He didn't even invent it, right? He got the technology. The MP3 had been invented by somebody else, but he had the vision, right? He saw more. He saw before. He saw farther. And so he saw the vision. And so his vision that he brought back to Apple was, I want a device the size of a deck of cards that'll hold 1,000 songs. That was the vision that he cast. And his team thought he was crazy. They thought he was crazy. If you remember, the MP3s back there held like 30 songs. And so his engineers went to work. And after several iterations and several challenges, there kind of became this come to head meeting with this top engineer. And he came into Jobs' office and he said, Steve, we've gotten this thing as small as we can get it. And he showed it to Jobs. And Jobs looked at it. And he had a fish tank in his office. And he walked over to the fish tank and he dropped it in the fish tank. And as the iPod went floating to the bottom, all these bubbles started coming out. And Jobs said, see those bubbles? He goes, those bubbles represent unused space in that device. He said, I know it's hard. I know you feel like you've exhausted every option, but I know you can do it. Go give it another shot. And his engineering team went back because they had the conviction and the emotion and the belief from their leader. And they came back and worked harder and developed what was ultimately the iPod, which it's hard to argue that that product and the success and the quality of what was developed completely transformed Apple. So here's the question for you is, what is your vision? Where do you want to take your team? And what I'd like you to do, I put some space in your notepad, and I'm going to just invest a couple minutes in this, but I want to challenge you after this call to continue with this exercise. And I want you to think about your team, and I want you to think about where you are right now with your team. And I want you to think about your department. And, so we're focusing on where we are today. And then I want you to go out 10 years. And I want you to pretend that one of the most influential newspapers or magazines or thought leaders in your space wants to write an article about you because of the tremendous transformation your organization has experienced under your leadership. And I want you to think for a minute, if they were going to write about me, what would they say? And so if you're typing here, I just want you to type. This is a creative writing exercise. And I'm just going to do this for a minute because we're tight on time, but I want to get you going. And then I'm going to encourage you to continue to do this for the next 21 days, to get up every morning and just write and say, if they were writing an article about me, what would it be about? So in a minute here, I'm going to say go, and I want you to write, and I'm going to throw some thoughts out to provoke your thinking, but I want you to write. So if you're all ready, start writing. What are they writing? So what have you accomplished? What have you transformed in your department? What have you done that's demonstrable? What kind of new standards have you set for your industry? What is it that you and your team have done that's gotten the attention of others? What have you done in your space, whether it's managing a call center, whether it's managing the grounds crew, whether it's running a whole department, whether it's managing the whole organization? What has your team done that's truly made a difference? What words come to mind as they describe you? Do they call you all thought leaders? Do they say you're preeminent? Do they say you're the best? Do they say you set a new standard? What is it that they talk about that you've done? What are some tangible results that you've accomplished? Have you increased market share? Have you reduced costs? Have you completely transformed the way that clients interact with your organization? Have you completely transformed the way the work that you do gets done? Have you set a whole new standard in terms of customer service and customer appreciation for what you've done? Keep writing until you get to 100 or 200 words. And what I encourage you to do is that every morning for the next 3 weeks, In fact, I'd love you to do it for the next 21 days. And see if you do something for 21 days, it creates a habit. I'd like you to spend 10 minutes in just creative writing. Who are you? Who's your organization? Who's your team? Who do you strive to become? And this is called a vivid image of your vision. It's called a vivid image of your vision. And then at the end, you can take that vivid image, that vivid description, and you can boil it down to a simple line. And I've given you some samples in the appendix, and I've given you a document that you can use in the appendix that you can use to help brainstorm you on other vision statements that you might create. So you can go access those and hopefully bring this down to an image, because it's hard to stand up in front of a group and run through that whole vivid description. But if you can boil it down to a phrase, to a sentence, then you can really use it to inspire your team. And if you do that, the benefits that you'll get is it'll provide focus. It'll create an identity that'll pull your people up and cause people to rise up to the best versions of themselves. It'll provide a greater sense of purpose to your work. It'll help align everybody to find common ground behind something we can all buy into, and it'll reduce conflict amongst your team. So we covered a lot. Great job. You all did a great job taking notes and tracking along. And so I want to answer questions. And while we're going through the Q&A session, I recognize we're at the bottom of the hour, so some of you are going to have to drop off. And so if you do, I respect your time, and I want to thank you for being a part of today's program. But if you have questions, I would certainly enjoy being in a position to answer those questions. So I want to encourage you to post them. I'm going to have to find them here on my system, but I think they're under the Q&A. Toby, maybe you can send me a chat or a direct message and tell me where to go to find those. I got them here under Q&A. So I will jump into those, and then I'll answer those, and I'll stay on as long as the questions are here. And then I want to let you know that we're going to do another session. You can find these on our website under events. And we're developing a new area on our website called Leadership Labs, Leader Labs, we're calling them. And we're going to be doing more on-site public workshops. So if you'd like something to come to your area in this kind of 2 to 4 hour on-site, quarter to half day format, depending on the environment and what have you, we're very open to that. So we'd love for you to go on and interact with us through our website and submit those ideas. So again, thank you for those that need to drop, and for those of you that can stay, I will be happy to take your questions. So let me see here. So the first question that I've received, let me see, let me take them in order. So how do I deal with team members who do not listen to me, and they go around me and go to others in the organization, including my boss? So this is this is a difficult one that I see a lot of leaders I deal with, work with, and I see this in a lot of environments. A boss wants to have an open door policy, and so they want to listen, and I believe they should listen. But what I would love for the boss to do is I would love for the boss to redirect back to you, if I could have that opportunity to coach them. And then for you, what I'd like for you to do is I'd like to encourage you to meet with your employee and ask them to buy into you, and ask them to buy into your vision, and ask them to buy into what you're trying to do with the team. I wrote a blog on this. It's called The Power of the Intentional Conversation. And, it really has to do with just sitting down. I'll just take you through the blog. It says, call an intentional meeting, sit down, pay the person a handful of compliments. I like 3 compliments. And then transition to the issue. And if they're going around you, what that tells me is they're not buying into me as their leader. and say, I would just be direct with that. You know, my concern is you're not buying into me as a leader. And what I'd love to do in the time we've got together today is just understanding what are the barriers that are prohibiting you from buying into me as a leader, and see if we can get them addressed so that I can get you fully supportive of what we're trying to do with this team. And then I would be quiet. I'd listen. I'd let them talk as long as they needed to talk. I'd encourage them by saying, and is there anything else? What else? What else? And when they're out of issues, then I would ask this question. I'd say, so what would I need to do out of everything that you've listed? What can I do? What can I change? How can I better support you to have you 100% bought in? And I would listen to see what their answer is. And then at the end, if you can deal with it on the spot, I'd deal with it. But if not, I would say, well, let me take this back and think about it. And let's call another meeting to get back together again. And if it's something complex, that's where you've got to make the decision. Is this person a fit for your organization? Number one. And if they are, then two, how do you need to change to better meet their needs? And that hierarchy I gave you at the beginning can be a great resource to help you identify where you may need to grow as a leader, or where you may need to create more clarity, or where you may need to better support that individual. Woo, that was a good question. Let's hope the next one's a little bit easier. Here's one. I needed this refresher. I really need help not getting drawn down and letting others' problems become mine. Well, this gets back to that whole idea of driving down accountability, decision-making, and problem solving. And I know when I first got into leadership, and I see this a lot of people I deal with, you know, our tendency is we're proud of being leaders, and so we like to solve problems, and we feel like that's adding value to our team members. So when they bring us a problem, we gladly take hold of it, and we want to jump in and we want to solve it. And what I would just encourage you to start developing into your questioning repertoire is something to the effect of, what do you think you need to do to resolve the problem? You know, listen to the problem, let them go through it, be a good listener. You know, sometimes our employees just need a sounding board, and that's okay. But really do everything in your power to hold yourself back from giving them the answer and saying, so what do you think you should do? I mean, I'll tell you, in my coaching business as a leadership coach, when people bring me challenges, you know, this is the approach I take. So what do you think you should do? And what I have found is that most of the time, in fact, I'm gonna give you a percentage. I'm gonna say 95% of the time, they know what they need to do to make the problem go away. But either one, they don't have the confidence to do it, or two, they don't want to go through the effort to do it. And so they want to pass it up to you. And so the question there is, so what do you need to do to go solve that problem? What do you recommend that you do to solve that problem? And what we want to do is focus people on things they can do, what's within their sphere of influence. So great question. Here's another one that came in. How do you handle big picture issues when your peers focus on the small things? Those doggone peers, they always kind of tend to get in our way a little bit, don't they? My approach to this, and what I've seen work really good for my clients and other middle managers, you know, if you're leading from the middle of the organization, it's one of the most difficult areas of the company to lead from, because you're not the top boss, right? Some of you on this call might have been thinking, you know what, my boss needed to be on this call because he needs to be doing more of this stuff, or she needs to be doing more of this stuff. And so when you're in the middle, you're a little bit caught in the middle, and you may be 100% buying into the bigger vision of the company, or you may think you've got a better vision for the company, and so your peers can be out of alignment with you. And so I talked about that intentional conversation a little while ago, and I love the power of that intentional conversation. And I think it works really well with peers. And here's where I'm going to my department. Here's my vision for my department. Here's what we're focused on. I mean, do you buy into what I'm doing? Do you support what I'm doing? And my goal is to let these problems be solved at this level. Problems should be solved at the level that's closest to the problem, that's worthy of their level of leadership. So if there's a problem happening with a client or with one of our systems or our processes, or a problem that's happening at the front line, I want as much as possible for that problem to be solved by that first level manager. Now, that first level manager obviously doesn't have the authority to go implement a new system or make some radical change. But I want that accountability. I want that decision making. I want that problem solving driven down as far as I can drive it, where the benefit of them making the problem is adequately offset by the risk of them making a bad decision, right? Because they could make a bad decision. And I would be a proponent of educating your peers on that as your leadership strategy. And so if people are bringing issues up to their boss and then their boss is bringing it over to you, my question would be, have they exalted all their efforts to solve that problem at their level? And if they have, then maybe we need to get in and be a tiebreaker. If not, we need them to work together and solve that out and bring a recommendation to us if something needs to be changed or implemented to improve the process. So great question, man. I'm getting, nobody's giving me softballs here. How about, how do I keep spirits high? Here's another question. When I feel as though I'm tasked with things that are not aligned with our overall vision. Well, sometimes, I mean, this is a great question. These are really good questions. So the, you know, if you go back to my list of the things that, you know, only we should do, right? So these are our high leverage activities that are going to mean the most to the team. Those things that only I must do, meaning these are kind of requirements of my job. And then those are the things that are giving me the most energy. Sometimes these things fall in that must list, and sometimes they don't. But I would work with your peers to get them to buy in to that idea of should, must, and want to do. And there's a couple resources that you can use. John talks about this in the book that I recommended. There's a topic or a chapter in there on priorities. He talks about it in the 21 Laws of Leadership, which is another great resource on the importance of priorities. And then Stephen Covey wrote a book called First Things First. And he talked about quadrant 2 activities, and he talked about rocks versus pebbles and sand. And rocks were activities that were important but non-urgent. And he talked about with non-urgent issues, we want to delegate those down. Okay, that's drive that down. So those problems that are solved down in our organization, and we want to focus on systems and processes that can help us eliminate those issues even coming up in the first place. And so I might encourage you to go back and revisit some of that literature and review the notes from this workshop and see if you can get your peers to buy into that and buy into what should we as leaders be focused on. Remember, you're a person of influence, right? So you influence in 360 degrees in your company. So you lead those that are below you, but you also lead those that are beside you, and to a certain extent, those that are above you. And so I would encourage you to use, you know, the questions that I gave you, the Q12 questions, really revolve around employees, but you can think of the intent of those and think, where is that person that's my peer where do they see my level of leadership? In other words, are they fighting for survival in the relationship they have with me? Do they look at me as somebody that cares about them, that respects them, that values them, and so we're connected on a relational level? Or do they see me as somebody that's helping them accomplish something that they didn't think they could accomplish because of the relationship that they have with me? Are they seeking guidance and support out of me? So I'd encourage you to go back and kind of look at that and say, is there some things I can think about in how I deal with my peers that might help me be a better partner to them, be a better peer of theirs, and help us work better together and help my influence grow for the betterment of the organization as a whole? Great question. Great question. Okay, I've got one final question here. How do I get around peers taking things personally when the situation is professional? Here's a concept, and I hope this helps you. But it's hard for people to argue with their own ideas. Let me say that again. It's hard for people to argue with their own ideas. And so, in my opinion, one of the arts of leadership is being able to get buy-in around the vision of where we're going as an organization, where we're going as a department, where we're going as a team, whatever makes sense, right? So that becomes our common ground, right? That's our focus, that's our alignment. And if people don't buy into the vision, if they're on your team, then you got to question, why are they on your team? And maybe they're not in the right seat. Maybe they shouldn't be on your team. And if they're a peer and they're not buying into your vision, then that means that you've got additional work to do to get them to buy in. And then, as much as possible, we want to bring them to the conclusion of what is the right thing to do. And so what that means is that we have to use more questions than statements. And what I have found is that it's hard, or people are much less likely to be offended if we're using questions than if we're making statements. So I would encourage you to think about the situations that you're dealing with and think about, have they bought into the vision? Do we have common ground around the vision? And are the points that they're bringing up, am I asking questions that could bring them to the conclusion of the best way to solve this is jointly applicable, or am I making statements? And if you're doing all of those things and you still don't have common ground, then maybe you need to be more open to their perspective. And if you've just finally gotten to that point that you can't make a decision and you're butting heads, then maybe at that point you've got to take it up and get a mediator involved. But I would really encourage you to do everything in your power to solve that conflict at your level before you take that up. And that's a great question to end on. I think it's my last question, because I mentioned earlier that I've got a certification with the 5 Behaviors of a Cohesive Team, which is Patrick Lencioni's work. And I love his model for teamwork. And I've got some new tools that are going to be coming out that I'll be rolling out later this year around conflict resolution. And so we're going to be doing a lot more work through these programs and through my writing and through my workshops I do with clients around conflict resolution. So stay tuned there. But in the meantime, I hope my answer helps you. If not, you're always welcome to call me directly or shoot me an email. We'll set up a time to talk. Okay, let me see. Toby, anything else? Let me see. I think Toby wanted to make sure I got those questions. I got them. Okay, listen, let me wrap up again by just thanking you for your time today. You all mean the world to me. I mean, this is just such a blessing that I get to sit here in a conference room and talk with you. And I'm truly humbled and honored by that opportunity. I'm always available. If I can be a sounding board, or if I can listen, or if you need my advice on something, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love solving leadership problems and leadership challenges. So I want to wish you all the best. Continue to rise up, and always lead with passion. Bye for now. Take care.